Okay, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have had a very bizarre couple of seasons. 2 years ago, they sort of famously had the number one seed for like 3 hours. They technically had it, but then there was a night game that then shifted it back to a different team having the one seed. But still, they had it for a bit, ultimately really fell off a cliff after that point, didn't even make the playoffs, and then this year, things really went off the rails. They ended up with a very high draft pick, and we will talk about how they can get back on track. First, let's talk about Trevor Lawrence, who, when we're talking about this offseason, there's going to be a lot of talk of, well, do you move on from Trevor Lawrence? There's been some consideration of, do you trade Trevor Lawrence? Well, we have to pay attention to the contract. This is Trevor Lawrence's contract. Keep in mind, he is under contract until 2031. This is a long deal. So the idea that you're going to get rid of him essentially day one of the contract is basically highly unlikely. For a cut, it's just not possible. It costs $203 million to cut him. You're not going to cut him. You could work out a trade if you want to, but here's what's notable about all of that is if you worked out a trade, the Jaguars would still be on the hook for most of this contract, so you would have to restructure it. So you have to change the contract to trade Lawrence, which means that Lawrence essentially gets a no-trade clause for this part of his contract. Although, actually, I forgot, I just double-checked. He has a no-trade clause anyways. So, regardless, you can't just get him to go anywhere. He can, choose where he wants to go. If he wants to stay in Jacksonville, he's here. Realistically, I think he's going to stay in Jacksonville. I don't think anything crazy is going to happen. I think you should plan for the future with Lawrence, who, I will say, I think people have maybe turned on him a bit too hard. He has had some really good moments and really good stretches of football in his career, been a bit inconsistent, and really, I thought last year the biggest issue was how injured he got. I think when healthy, he's been pretty good, but let's talk about how you can maybe improve the situation around him. Because if you look at PFF grades for each positional category, it's really bad. I mean, the strength of this team right now is their pass blocking, which is graded 19th according to PFF. And I get that that's not everyone's cup of tea, but still, not ideal here. Passing 22nd. The first thing the Jaguars have to do to get back to being a playoff team is Trevor Lawrence has to be good again, right? You have to start seeing more consistent play from Trevor Lawrence. You did get Brian Thomas Jr. a really good season out of him. So you have that. Obviously, they let Calvin Ridley walk last offseason, but you have Brian Thomas Jr. That's something to build around. And they kind of could use some depth, I think, at the receiving position. You do have Evan Ingram as well, who can, he's a tight end, but that's factored into receiving. He can, play well. So there are things like that. But as a whole, and Christian Kirk shows up now and then, but as a whole, this is kind of where they're at. They could use really kind of one of everything almost. The run blocking hasn't been great. Rushing hasn't been outstanding. Now, I will say they added Liam Cohen as an offensive head coach. We did see Tampa Bay's run offense go from really bad to really good. Now, Tampa Bay also added a center. Their right guards played a lot better, and they added Bucky Irving, a really good running back. But nonetheless, Liam Cohen helped develop those players, right? So you can definitely hope that maybe just the coaching change will help some of that. Defense also did not grade very well. 22nd in run defense, 25th in pass rush, 24th in coverage. That is something that, again, for example, the Trayvon Walker thing. Usually he gets a lot of sacks. Fans tend to like him. PFF has always been lower on him, and some other advanced stats have always been lower on him. Might be the kind of guy who doesn't make an impact play in and play out, but when he does make an impact, he makes a lot of impacts, right? Kind of a home run hitter as opposed to a contact hitter, which sometimes for a pass rusher, that's what you want. I've personally been a little bit lower on him as well over the course of his career, but you do have Josh Hines-Allen as well at the edge rush position. So I actually don't think pass rush is as bad as that. And they have some young secondary players as well. Maybe you just hope the young guys can start playing better. As for key free agents, there really isn't a lot. Brandon Sheriff and Andre Cisco are the two guys that I brought up. Cisco, defensive back. Sheriff, a offensive lineman. If those are the price tags for them, $6 million and $9 million respectively, I wouldn't hate just bringing them back. For Jacksonville, they do have some money to spend. They have $31 million in 2025, $80 million in 2026, which sounds like a lot, although it's not a crazy amount. And keep in mind, Lawrence's contract is very backloaded. So he's going to be making $17 million this season, $24 million the next season, and that's kind of how the Eagles won with Jalen Hurts. Is they essentially, won when he was on the first year of his big contract. So usually, as of right now, is when you want to be most competitive. Of course, Jacksonville is a long way from that right now. They're picking top 5. It kind of is what it is, and the contract only gets higher from there. It'll balloon up to $78 million in 2029, and then $74 million in 2030. So again, long way to go from there. But essentially, you might have 4 years or so, or 3 or 4 years of a window, the first 2 of those years being a bigger window in terms of the contract. But again, are you there yet is the question. Jacksonville, throughout their history, have sometimes thrown too much money at free agents instead of building through the draft, and it can only keep you competitive for maybe a year or so. Here's the best thing about where the Jaguars are at right now, in my opinion. You look at their draft capital. So this is, each pick, how many picks they have in each round. So you see there are 10 total picks, and not to mention they're picking top 5 in just about all of these rounds. They have multiple thirds, multiple fourths, and multiple sixths. They have accumulated draft picks, and that's a great way to build a roster. And we're in a new era GM-wise. There is no Trent Baalke, and maybe the best thing to happen for Jaguars fans out of the whole Liam Cohen, Tampa Bay, Trent Baalke scandal was the fact that Trent Baalke ended up losing his job out of the whole thing. Cohen seems to be that he didn't really want to be a head coach with Baalke as GM, or maybe it was just a way to make sure Cohen stayed on. I don't know. But nonetheless, they're going to get a new GM, and you hope that you can start hitting some of these picks better. And it's not to say that they haven't hit on some of these picks, but I think sometimes they haven't maximized these picks, right? Not to go back here, but the Trayvon Walker versus Aiden Hutchinson thing. Trayvon Walker's been an effective piece for them, but Aiden Hutchinson has been a defensive player of the year candidate who just about everybody said should have been drafted. Now, again, that's one example, but when you consistently do things like that, I always do my post-draft analysis videos, and there's the consensus big board and then when the player was drafted that I compare. And sometimes you can get someone who's lower on a consensus big board and it's still a good idea. But Jacksonville consistently drafts okay, this player is ranked 200th and they draft him at 100. Like, they consistently do that, and you're just not maximizing the value of your picks. Getting a new regime in there could hopefully get Jacksonville to maximize the value of their picks and start to fully build this roster and complete this roster. To me, that's what it's going to come down to. There's not a ton of money to sign guys in free agency. Hey, if Chris Godwin's available, sign him, right? I've seen some speculation with that because of the fact that Liam Cohen and Godwin have a connection. Godwin did have potentially a career year before getting injured. That makes sense to me. I think, if he's available, make sure you pull the trigger, get him on your roster. But as a whole, I really think what it's going to come down to, which is the case for a lot of teams, is they got to start drafting better, and we'll see if they do. But those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.